Hi everyone, Jolene here from Bookworm Adventure Girl. I hope that you are all doing well. It's Monday again, and today we will be talking about what is probably Margaret Atwood's most recognized and successful novel, The Handmaid's Tale. Over 35 years later, and it is still making an impact. I'm not sure that there is really anything that I can say that hasn't already been said about this novel, but I will share a bit about the novel, the time I talked to Margaret Atwood when she was signing my copy, and I will show you my newest edition of the novel that I have received. So The Handmaid's Tale is Atwood's 6th novel, and it was originally published in 1985. My copy was published sometime in the early 90s, I think probably around 92, when I first heard of who Atwood was. And this was the first Atwood novel that I read. And shortly after I read this, I watched the movie that had come out in 1990, starring Natasha Richardson, Robert Duvall, Aidan Quinn, and Faye Dunaway. The Handmaid's Tale is still one of the most challenged books, usually for vulgarity and sexual content, which is interesting and kind of comical considering all of the books that have come after it. But its popularity has only increased, and it has seen new fans with the series starring Elizabeth Moss. And that began in 2017. And this series has taken the story to a whole new level, and the 4th season begins, I believe it's later this month. So the 3rd time I saw Atwood speak was at a conference in New York in 2015. The picture that I used for this series is a picture of Atwood signing my copy of The Handmaid's Tale. I will show you at the conference. And since then, I have had a couple other books flat signed, which means that there's no inscription, because I attended these events online due to COVID. So one of the neat things about the New York conference is that they took the first, I think, couple chapters of The Handmaid's Tale, and they temporarily tattooed different lines on her hands or arms. So Margaret Atwood had the first line, which is, "We slept in what had once been the gymnasium." Mine comes from a few paragraphs into chapter 2, "And why the window only opens partly." And my best friend who was with me continues that line with, "And why the glass in it is shatterproof." So they took pictures of all of the lines on people's hands and arms, and then they hung them up on the wall so you could actually read the first couple of chapters that way. So this story takes place in the Republic of Gilead, which used to be known as the United States. And this is a place of Marthas, angels, commanders, and handmaids. Handmaids are the fertile women who are forced to bear children for the members of high society in Gilead. And Offred is a handmaid and the protagonist of the story. She is the narrator, telling the reader of her everyday life at the commander's house, and then she shares memories of the time before the revolution and her time in training to become a handmaid. The book has 15 parts. Every other part is called a night, and this is when Offred is alone in her room at the commander's, when she can remember her life before and tells the reader about her family and about other handmaids and the infamous Aunt Lydia. So because this book is so famous and I've had a lot of influence from other sources, I wanted to do my best to read it as though it were for the first time, as though it were like an entirely new story that I hadn't heard before. And that's hard to do, but what I did is I listened to an audio version and read, which was helpful because it did feel different, and it helped that it has been, almost 30 years since I last read it. It also helped to be reading this along with other Atwood work and in order, because I can kind of see some of the similarities and differences in this novel compared to the previous ones that we've read. So in Atwood's previous novels, we see great writing with wonderful imagery and metaphors. There are also several similar themes, such as power, identity, expectation of men and women and their roles in society, the body, religion, entrapment, and the need to survive. So what sets this novel apart in particular from other Atwood novels. And I think there's two things. One is the symbolism in this novel is incredibly strong. Like symbols such as the color red, the eyes, eggs, the wall, and like that's just a few that I can think of off the top of my head. And then second would be the setting, and the fact that this is in a dystopian world I think helps too. Every time that I've heard Atwood speak about The Handmaid's Tale, she always says that there was nothing that she put into the book that hasn't happened in the world already. So I think it was quite genius to set it in the future society because it allows the reader to feel separated enough from the story. But then she filled that world with things that we can understand and relate to without feeling immediately threatened. So I will leave a link to a video, I think it's about 7, maybe 8 minutes of Atwood talking about The Handmaid's Tale, because there is so much in this book that we could have a really good conversation about. Each theme, in my opinion, can be broken down. So for example, power and how it is used, like power is shown through violence and fear, through language and the sexual rights or lack of sexual rights. And the same is true of identity. Offred is trying to keep her identity and not lose who she is. And there are all the new identities that people have now versus before the revolution. People's identities have been diminished to their functions in society. And we could go on forever with that. So I think part of its continued popularity and why it is considered a modern day classic is because it continues to have relevance to our society. This time reading this again during a pandemic, I found it had new relevance. Phrases like "in the before time" are exact words I have heard people say during COVID. And there's a quote on page 32 in my edition, it's at the end of chapter 6, that I thought was also interesting. It says, "Ordinary," said Aunt Lydia, "is what you are used to. This may not seem ordinary to you now, but after a time it will. It will become ordinary." And this made me think of something I saw on the news early on in the pandemic when they said that, we always see changes in society after major events. And they gave some examples of war, when taxes were introduced and they were put in place during the war, but then they stayed. And after 9/11, the changes in security at airports, they stayed around and they're now normal to us. So no one questions these things, and it made me kind of wonder what will remain after the pandemic and become ordinary. So lastly, I thought I would show you my most recent edition of The Handmaid's Tale. It's from the Folio Society, and it comes in a slipcase, and it has beautiful artwork. It was published in 2012, and the introduction is written by Margaret Atwood. This front cover illustration is inspired from page 26, and it says, "One of them is vastly pregnant. Her belly under her loose garment swells triumphantly." And I'll show you a couple of the other illustrations as well. There's some really nice ones. This one on page 30, "We turn the corner onto Main Street. There are other women." And then on page 143 is when they are playing Scrabble. So the Folio Society has some really beautiful books and editions, and I'll leave a link to their website in the description box below, along with the video of Atwood talking about The Handmaid's Tale and the reading schedule for this series, which now goes until the end of July. So please let me know what you think of The Handmaid's Tale. What are some themes or symbols that resonated with you? Can you think of any current events that are similar to what we read in The Handmaid's Tale? I look forward to chatting with you in the comments. Thanks again for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day, and don't forget to make every day an adventure.